Okay, Glenda's back. Well, good afternoon, everyone, to our panelists and to our attendees for the webinar. My name is Shellae Versey, and I'm an assistant professor of psychology at Fordham University in New York City. And on behalf of all the members of the Black and Gerontology and Geriatrics community, we would like to warmly welcome you to this webinar entitled Community Engagement in Aging Research. This webinar is supported by the American Geriatric Society, Grant Makers in Aging, American Society on Aging, the Healthy Aging Sections Fellows of the New York Academy of Medicine, and the Southern Gerontological Society. So a bit of housekeeping before we get started. I just want to take the opportunity to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on the big website. So a notice to all attendees will be distributed once the recording is available. You'll get a notice via email. And then following our panel discussion, there will be a Q&A immediately following. It will last for approximately 15 minutes. If you have any questions in the interim, feel free to put them in the question or the chat box. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists for the afternoon. Our experts joining us today are Ms. Glenda Wright, Ms. Aisha Cooper, and Ms. Aisha Young. On today's agenda, our experts are going to provide their rich insights on how to do research involving older Black men who are often underrepresented in aging research, even though we have a breadth of research that there are issues that particularly affect older Black men. We recognize that maybe there are emotions that might be difficult that come up with this conversation. So if you're feeling distressed, let us know. But our purpose here today is really to educate and to share. So to provide context for our attendees, I will let them introduce ourselves. I would like to give each panelist approximately 5 minutes to introduce themselves. And let's start from Ms. Wright. I believe you need to, yep.
Yes, I had to unmute myself. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies. Again, my name is Glenda Wright, and I am your senior among you. And if I see 2 more months, I'll have my 70. So I'm sure you know what that means. But I came out of school, well, I finished college in 1975 from Bloomberg State Teachers College, and my hopes was to become a teacher. And I just didn't have the patience for classroom back then. But I was able to pass that along to my children. And I have 2 children. One is a professor at Bowie State, a math professor. My other daughter, she's a principal. And even my grandchildren, they're educators, they're teachers and whatnot. But education to my family was very important because you always want your family to be a step above than what you're doing. And I come from parents, a 2-parent home that were from North Carolina. They instilled family values in us, and that is, we pay it forward with our children. After college, I took an interest in working with HUD. And after I started working with them, I became interested in working with senior citizens. So in 1978, I got my first decent job, with a little decent salary. Back then, I thought it was a decent salary. In 1978, working with senior citizens. And from that time until right now, presently today, I'm still, back in 78, I'm like, wow, it's gonna be a while before I reach that age. But right now today, I've surpassed that age, and I'm doing the same thing that I was doing in 1978. I love it. I have a compassion for them. I understand them. And the reason I'm saying I understand them is because I am one. I know my wants, I know their needs, I know my needs. And being a senior and you understanding what it means to be a senior, it's a whole different ballgame. I have a new perspective on being a senior now. And then when I go amongst them and they have grievances or they have situations, I understand. And that is the key for anyone working in the gerontology field, that compassion and understanding supersedes all the kind of accolade that, the titles we have. That passion and understanding supersedes that. And so that's kind of my story in a nutshell. But currently I am working with Rutgers University. I had been a director for a housing group for about 24 years. And so after that, I started working with Rutgers University. I retired, but I am retired. However, Rutgers asked me to work with them, on Alzheimer's disease in older Black Americans, which, like I was telling the other two young ladies, African Americans are 2.5 times likely to get Alzheimer's disease than any other ethnic group mainly because of our lifestyles. Our lifestyles have a lot to do with our health. When you look at our areas and see the different, as we know, the fast food places, we don't take care of ourselves like we should. And we are susceptible to some of all kinds of diseases. So we're trying to minimize our risk and live a long, healthy life, because until he's ready for you, you're not going anywhere. So you want to live a good life like for that. So that's it, because I can just go on and on over. That's it.
That is well said, Ms. Wright. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Not a problem.
So let's move on to Miss Aisha Cooper.
Hi, I'm Aisha Cooper. I'm originally from Indianapolis, and that's where I received my undergrad in public health at Indiana University. I knew at that time that I wanted to work with the senior community, but I didn't do it at that time just yet.
Okay.
But kind of back to Glenda's point of, just having a lot of family. And I had, although my parents weren't together, they were divorced when I was young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Both of my families were very big. I just lost my grandmother a couple weeks ago, who was 93 years old.
Wow, God bless her.
So I was really blessed to have both sets of my grandparents for most of my life. And I opened an adult daycare center in Snellville, Georgia in 2010. And one of the reasons that I did that was in honor of my grandfather. He had Alzheimer's and passed away many years ago, but it was to honor him, but then to also honor just all of us in the Black community that don't necessarily think that adult day could be for them, and create a comforting space. Although we were a medical model, that wasn't how we led the program. We did have the medical oversight, but like I had said earlier on the call, it was about play. It was about just connection. And although, you're coming in with a cognitive impairment, you're taken as exactly who you are right now, and not judged. And you're amongst friends and peers that feel the same way. So we created an environment that, although we took care of the participants that were attending the program, we also took care of the whole family. And we did have a diverse group of people. So I won't say that it was a primarily African-American center, but we did get to have quite a few African Americans in our program, about 60%, and it was being led by someone that looked like them, which is gonna, speak to our panel discussion today. In that program, though, we got the opportunity I did training groups for caregivers and really hear from the whole family. And Again, to Glenda's point, we really have to do a better job at our own health. And it really starts with us, because now we are where we can make some lifestyle changes that can change that trajectory, but also encourage our loved ones to do something different.
Thank you so much. I am sensing a theme of compassion and community here, which is appropriate for the panel. So thank you for that. And last but not least, Aisha Young.
Yes, thank you for having me. So my name is Aisha Young. I am a third generation HBCU graduate. So I think that's just important to say, so we know that attending HBCUs is very important. I knew I wanted to be a gerontologist when I was 11 years old. I had a very, very close relationship with my grandparents. And so that led me to study and get my bachelor's and my master's, both in gerontology, undergrad, Bethune-Cookman University, graduate school, University of South Florida. And currently I'm getting my second master's in pastoral theology from Xavier University of Louisiana, from the Institute for Black Catholic Studies. And so seniors are my ministry as well. And so very proud of that. I started African Americans in Gerontology in 2009. The reason for that is because as an undergrad, I was always looking for a professional organization to join to have the mentorship that I so craved. And although Bethune-Cookman did have a gerontology program, once we left, it was like, okay, well, are you still in the field? You know, what's going on with the retention? Who's taking care of us if we're not? And so after I graduated from University of South Florida in 2008, I said, okay, there's still nothing. I need something like, you know, engineers have NSBE, the National Society for Black Engineers, and so on and so forth. And so I was like, we need something, because I need, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. So I said, okay, let me start African Americans in Gerontology. And so that began as an organization of professionals and students to provide mentorship opportunities, and also network, because once again, I'm like, where is everybody that I went to school with? But ultimately, as a group, we want to improve the quality of life of African Americans, of older African Americans, excuse me. And since I live in Colorado, obviously I'm a little bit geographically isolated because we don't have the highest population of seniors, but you know, Colorado wants to be a place where people want to retire. And we do have a lot of retired military, but we need people who are in the field, who can have a seat at the table and make some changes and do some things behind the scenes. But we also need people to be practicing, to be researchers, to have adult day centers, so that, you know, we know best how to take care of our own. Earlier, we had spoken about institutionalization and how generally African Americans don't institutionalize their elderly. So if they're out in the community, how are they being served and how are they being taken care of? And so it is my mission to do whatever I can, big or small.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. And I'm just going to jump right in with a few questions. And it sort of is directly related to what you just mentioned, Aisha, in terms of having a space where community members, people who are working in these spaces, researchers can come and connect with one another. And I want to hear a little bit about how each of you find the intergenerational piece playing a role here. How do you connect people who are working in gerontological, either if it's service or if it's research or just trying to promote the well-being of older African-American adults or older minority adults, and the younger generation? How do you how have you found bridging that gap? And what are some intergenerational success stories, if you've seen any, of bringing younger people and younger adults into this conversation?
Well, I'll begin. I think, you know, I'm a little bit of a poster child for that because it's due to my intergeneration activity with my grandparents that I became a gerontologist. And I literally tell people I made a career out of loving my grandparents. And so the intergenerational piece is so important. I think that one of the biggest things that needs to happen as far as intergenerational activity is not having that ageism stigma. I think when you look at older people and have love and compassion and see them as community instead of, you know, that old person over there or the separation, I think that that's a very important piece, not ostracizing them. Also, understanding that it is a blessing to be older. You know what I mean? Look at what's currently going on in the pandemic, and we're seeing people in record numbers not make it to the age of 65, 75, 85. So I think there needs to be a paradigm shift around ageism. And I think the best way to combat that is to have intergeneration activity where people are regularly interacting with each other in different generations. I think that when you have pilot programs with like preschools being next to senior centers and things of that sort, it starts when you're young, so that by the time you get to be an adult, you have positive feelings. I think also recognizing, because now I'm in the sandwich generation, I never thought I'd be there. And when I say sandwich generation, meaning I'm the middle generation, I have a daughter, and then my parents are now, because they're baby boomers, in the 65 and older category. And so what does that look like for me being in the sandwich generation and all of us in my cohort? Do we have positive feelings about taking care of our parents and our aunts and uncles and people in our community? What does that look like for our cohort? And how can we make the best of it so that when we're out of the sandwich and we're the top layer, you know, that we're getting the best? I think you have to give in order to get in any sort of relationship transaction. So we must be giving, and that's how you do with the intergeneration activity.
Wonderful.
And I can piggyback on that. One thing about senior centers or adult day programs is that they're out in the community. It's typically an older individual that lives at home, but they're getting out into the community. And so first and foremost, it's finding out what's available for them to get out in the community, right? And stay involved and keep that meaningful life, being able to pass down what they have. You asked for success stories. And one thing that we did early on in our program was we partnered with Boy Scouts of America. And they have a career program that actually targets boys and girls. And what it does is it asks sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school what their career trajectory is. And based on their answer, they have different, what they called was Explorer Posts. And an Explorer Post is a business that matches what their career interest is. So what we were able to offer was nursing, physical therapy, because we had that on site. And those were draws for these high school students. But then once they got there, yes, we would give them that piece, but it was more about connecting with the senior. So first, what we had to do was allow them to be honest with themselves of their comfort level with the senior. Because quite frankly, we didn't want you to be part of the program if you were afraid of a senior. And these aren't just seniors, these are also seniors with cognitive impairment. So, and we wanted them to have the best experience, both of them. So what we did for at least 9 years, which ended up being one of the successful Explorer Posts in our area in Snellville, Georgia, it grew from maybe 5 students, and they would attend throughout their school year, and they would only have to attend once a month, but we found a lot of them that would ask if they could do more than once a month. And what we would do was pair them up with a senior, because as we grew as a business, we couldn't give all of our gems, is what I like to call them, the attention that they needed. The one-on-one attention. That's not how the business model is set up, right? But we could utilize the students to do that. You know, by year 4 or 5, we had enough students to pair up with about 80% of our seniors. And then it just became a phenomenon that these students would then go back to school and talk about how much fun they had. And so then we got to the football teams would reach out, the DECA, the FBLA, you know, whatever community service they needed to come in and spend time. Now, I would say a lot of that was because the base of our program was to have fun. But it changed the light of what some people look at as this older individual. It's like what you said, Aisha, is that senior over there, that old person over there. And since we're losing a little bit of that just in our families, having younger grandparents or, you know, whatever, it's important for us to find that for our kids. So I have a 14-year-old, and, you know, when you have a mompreneur, you just have to be part of it. And he's taught Lego classes at the center, and had to, you know, just find his way of engagement. But that was like his second home for many years. But you know, it goes back to what we're saying with the sandwich generation, is not making them feel like, first of all, it's not making the senior feel like, you know, you're any different because of whatever your physical or cognitive impairment is. But then it's also allowing the younger individuals to know that it's okay. And there's still a person there, and they need love and attention just as much as you do. And we can bridge that gap.
I love that. And it really does speak to what Aisha was saying earlier about breaking down those barriers and those preconceived notions that we have about older adults. And also to what Ms. Wright mentioned earlier about just being compassionate. And so, Ms. Wright, I want to bring you into the conversation because this really connects to a point that you mentioned earlier, this idea of bringing the community in, because oftentimes we don't see older adults, and when we do, they're sort of off in institutions. And so having this relationship where you're interfacing with a university, but as you said, you're also a member of the community and you work with community members in terms of lifestyle changes. How do you think that's beneficial? How do you find your position as sort of this liaison between university researchers, but also the community in terms of bridging those sort of gaps?
Well, the other comments the other young lady said are absolutely correct, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. You know, and I have to refer back sometimes to my own personal, story. Even now, I have 11 grandchildren, and when they were small, it was, oh, mama, mama. But now that when they became older, teenagers, and in their 20s, it's like, you don't even exist. And that is the disconnect for this younger generation. And so what I think that a lot of us in the field needs to do, we really have to talk to our children and these young folk and let them know, you see this older person, you're gonna get there one day. So this is what you need to do. Let them, they are people, they are real people. Without you, without them, you would not even be here. What I do, it all depends on the area you're setting. You're setting in Colorado, or you're setting in not so much New York or in Snellville. It may be a little different than my setting. Like I'm in an urban setting. In my setting, I deal with the housing authority public housing senior citizens, which is a whole new, just a different arena as to someone maybe in Aspen or maybe in Colorado or someone. We're dealing with some residents that are uneducated, that when they see a researcher coming or someone coming from a hospital or a group to talk to them, first, their defense, they built up this defense, like, you're an educated person coming to see me, what are you selling? I put myself, when I go to visit the senior buildings, I built my community trust in them. That's the main thing. You've got to build community trust so they'll trust you. Then when I'm making the presentation to them, I find out a little bit about their background, and I try to mesh my background with theirs to make them feel comfortable. I'll say, well, greetings to everybody. It's so good to see you. However, guess what? Have anybody ever heard of tobacco, stringing tobacco? A lot of them are from the South. Yes, we know what doing tobacco. We know what this is, and it's getting them comfortable with my presentation. And I let them know I'm not going to promote anything that I would not do to you. It's got to be such a feeling to make them feel so comfortable that you're able to deliver. We're asking them to join Rutgers for data, for research. So therefore, if you just go in with my degree and say, I came out of college and I need you to do this research, and then you're gonna say, we're not doing that. But my approach is so subtle and so unlike you that it's okay. I will not do this research. If I think it's bad for you, then I'm not going to do it. But for you to take a pill, an aspirin, someone had to take that aspirin, or someone had to go through a research for you to take your medication. So for me, overall, it's the approach, how we approach our seniors, to ask them questions. Where are you from? How many children do you have? Just to get the conversation going. And as for the young people, now I have to, when I see young folk, I try to pull them to the side and I try to let them know, look, you're going to get there one day, God willing. So you got to have compassion for them. But if they, and I always tell my people when I do my workshops, our grandchildren have no problem calling you, asking you for $20. Hey, grandma, how you doing? You got $20 I can borrow? They have no problem, no problem with that. But we have to talk to them and educate our young people to know that their parents or their grandparents, they're seniors. So let's show them with compassion. So my thing is the approach and compassion.
I love that. Approach and compassion.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wright.
Yes, you're welcome.
With that, I wonder if you all have any ideas about what we could be doing in addition to what we're already doing. Glenda, you just talked about going out and speaking to seniors, building that trust to enable older adults to participate in research opportunities. And oftentimes, I think people build up some of this distrust because they haven't often reaped the benefits of participating in research in the past, and in some cases have been harmed. So are there things that the research community could be doing better? Or are there ways that innovations that you see in your community expertise where you think, wow, this would be a great opportunity to partner with a researcher or partner with a university? And if so, if you could tell us about those ideas or what you sort of see as missing.
Yes, the most important thing with any research group, be truthful with the residents, with the participants. You let them know exactly what the research entails. I mean, that's a part of your IRB anyway, but you have to be truthful with them and let them know exactly what it's going to entail and how it's going to benefit them. They're giving you data, and I'm sure a lot of times we'll take that data and we'll contact NIH for grants. and they will give us grants. And so we have to make sure we put some of that back into the community. We really have to be honest and open about any type of research that we are doing with the seniors. And that's my take. My thing is just be honest, because they have to understand exactly what our purpose is. So just that honesty, just simply honesty.
Thank you.
Yes.
Aisha or Aisha, do you have any ideas about sort of along that thread, if there are new and exciting spaces where you can sort of see partnerships going in the future between some of the work that you're doing?
You want to go?
Sure. I like Glenda's point that she had made earlier about using the example of aspirin. So in order for it to be safe for all of us to take aspirin, somebody had to take it before us. I think also, the importance of language and also the importance of education, right? Because we all participate in research at some level. If you do a survey, did you like the checkout lady at the grocery store? That is a survey that leads to data. Focus group, if we all sit around and we're all watching Queen Sugar, well, did you like, how did you feel when Prosper went to the hospital last week? That is a focus group. So that again is research that gives data. I think that there is some thoughts and philosophies and absolute negativity, you know what I'm saying, about research and what that looks like. And so I think that informing people of the different ways that you can participate in research is helpful. Also, Glenda also mentioned like the risk benefit analysis. What am I getting out of it? What are we getting out of it? But doing that self-check, maybe this isn't for me if I have to participate in research where I'm going to have to get a colonoscopy, but my colon perforated the last time I got a colonoscopy. Now we still need that research, but if you're like, nope, this does not feel right to me, then don't do it. But we also have community who can step in. I think also knowing that with thinking about the different ways to participate in research, you don't always have to do it while you're living. Donating your body to science. I know, especially as a Catholic theologian, you know what I mean? People are like, whoa, you're going to say that? Yes, I'm going to say that. With doing any sort of brain health, why not? If you are not going to use it, go ahead and donate it. And that is a very safe way for you to not have any risk to your health, to the health of your family, so that we can see these things, so we can perhaps find some treatments for sickle cell, which specifically affects African Americans, to see about diabetes and neuropathy and breakdowns. We learn a lot from cadavers. And so if you're not able to do it as a living person, then certainly consider doing it as a non-living person. I think that also talking to people about the Institutional Review Board, because a lot of people don't know that it is safer now than it was before. And if you're not a part of a university, also say, these are the things that we are putting in place for your safety. If you feel uncomfortable at any time, you may leave. You know what I mean? The biggest thing with seniors is autonomy. Nobody wants their autonomy to be taken away. So make sure that we're always respecting that while we're doing any sort of research.
And I would just add to that, getting to the people that can, that they trust. And I'll give you a personal example. My father has Parkinson's, and we have in the Atlanta area, a lot of different research, available research. And we tried to get him into a program here. There were some challenges with the stage that he was at, so we weren't able to participate in that research program. But I did call, once I saw the topic, I called him to say, what makes you willing to do research? And one of the reasons for him was he's an engineer. So to him, the math and science behind it all and what it can do and leave for others. And we don't always look at it like that in our community. But two, being what he calls me as the favorite daughter, I'm the only girl, so he can say that. That he knows that I wouldn't propose something that's going to put him in harm's way. And so it's how can we get to the people that our community trusts, which a lot of it is within our churches and within our medical community. But to me, the caveat is the medical community that looks like them. You know, if they're going to a doctor that doesn't look like them, they might not trust that what, you know, the information or the recommendations that they're providing. So how can we go out in the community? Like I said, here in the Atlanta area, I mean, we have the Emory Brain Health Forums, which are very informative. But who's signing up and going to those are people like us in education or owner operators of businesses with seniors or associations that support seniors. But how can we reach the people that really can impact the person that's going to make the choice to do the research?
Dr. Versey, if you don't mind, I'd like to make another point too. When we're thinking about policy and legislation, all of that stuff is backed up by data. And the only way to get the data is to be able to gather it. And the only way to gather it is to do the research. So just on the flip side of what we were talking about before, in order to change policy, in order to have projects funded and things of that sort, we need the data, and we need people who are willing to participate in order to get that data, to make changes, to have things funded, to have programs be sustainable and long lasting. So that's the other piece I just wanted to share.
Oh, thank you for sharing. As I said at the start of this call, I am learning so much from all of you, and I appreciate you sharing those lessons. And what I'm hearing is that there's a recurring thread of trust, of knowing that there are people who look like the people that we're trying to serve that are at the fore of some of these efforts. And also being compassionate at every step of the way, being transparent and truthful, I think has come up several times. I have a range of questions that I want to follow up with, but I will, to leave time for Q&A, I'll just ask one last question, and then I'll open it up for our audience to ask questions. So audience, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box so that we can have our panelists to reflect on them. I wanted to, since we have such a diversity in terms of location, physical location, we have Snellville, which is a suburb right outside of Atlanta. We have New Jersey, New Brunswick area, and we have Colorado. I'm wondering, with the specific areas you're focused on, an increasing issue for older adults, even in communities, is being able to connect with other older adults. We see an increase in loneliness and social isolation. And I think you tapped on something earlier, Aisha, in terms of not having those younger grandparents or having family members who live far from one another. So I just wonder if you find that in your work, and how do you see the community engagement piece really being important to reach out to either detect some of those early signs of Alzheimer's, or to reach out to people who might be suffering from loneliness? Are there specific things that you found that are really working, that are successful?
In our area, the unfortunate thing is we have an influx of our aging population.
Mm.
So right now, there's just not enough. There's a wait list for affordable senior housing. There's a wait list for senior centers. the process that it takes to go through to get funding, if funding is needed to have home-based community services, is a lengthy process. The person could have declined enough to end up needing residential placement by the time they get approved. So I haven't seen successes in that area just yet, for us, because our numbers outweigh what's available.
That's a great point.
Now, you said New Brunswick. I'm the Newark, New Jersey area, not New Brunswick. Sorry. That's okay. Our community engagement piece is we have to go to the churches, and like Aisha says, waiting lists, all of that's closed. You can't find affordable senior housing. But because I am working with the housing authorities, with the senior population, you have about 6,000 senior citizens collectively in the state of New Jersey, mainly at the Newark Housing Authority. But we open it up to their community centers. I have workshops there, the churches, and that is one of the bullet points of minimizing their risk with Alzheimer's disease. They have to be involved with community to keep that brain, that mind functioning. You have to be able to incorporate yourself with others. That loneliness, that inclusive, that loneliness it's not good. It's not conducive for them. So we have to get them to engage in the community. That is by having some type of community event for them. Get in the churches, even getting up and explaining and talking to them, letting them know how important it is to communicate with each other. And I always tell them in my workshops, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And that's the truth. And you be very honest and open with them and let them know, look, you have to be able to communicate, keep your mind active with other people. And like I said, what we do is we have community events, whether it's at a local housing authority or at the church. But that is a way to keep them fully involved.
Nice. Thank you. I'm sorry, Aisha, you were going to say something?
Oh, yes. So I have two perspectives. So my perspective as a gerontologist is the importance of civic engagement, knowing that older people can still serve and that they're not thrown away, and that is a way to help combat some isolation, even when there's, like when Meals on Wheels lost its funding, or their funding was decreased, and we won't get into all the politics of that, thumbs down, but you know what I mean? So losing some of those programs or the funding and what to do next. But I think civic engagement is important for isolation. As a theologian, I would say, hindsight is 2020. We had the pandemic in 2020. There's something very spiritual about that. So we had the opportunity to reset and look at some things. I had the opportunity to be a part of parish senior ministries throughout the pandemic. And that was one real big way that we were able to combat isolation, because it says, okay, well, what technology do you have access to? What technology does your neighbor have access to? Because hear me when I tell you, in person, like stop for maybe 3-4 weeks. And then people were on Zoom. No, we're still going to meet at our time. We might not be able to have our lunches and the community events that we had in person, but we are still going to pray together. We are still going to be together. We are still going to check in on each other. If I'm on Zoom, I can see your face. And so maybe I'm not able to see as quickly as you're declining, but we're going to stay in touch. I think another benefit of 2020 is telehealth. Telehealth is such a blessing. Telehealth, you're never late for your appointments. If you have to use the bathroom, if you have to take care of whatever needs that you have, if traffic stinks, you know what I'm saying? So with telehealth, there are two options that I'm aware of. You can do it simply on the phone as a call, but when being able to video chat with your medical professional so that you still have that in person. So your doctor that you've had for 10 years, you know, can possibly see a decline just by being able to see you on the phone. And so I think that there were, 2020, as terrible as it was, and may, you know, the people, rest in peace, people who have lost family members and all that because of the pandemic, we have had an opportunity to find other ways to keep people engaged when we can't be out. So I think that there's an opportunity here to explore those things and see what other things that we can come up with. So.
One quick interjection that I'm finished. There's a company, one of our senior buildings, there's a company that they got in touch with. This company donated all of those seniors a laptop. There's some companies out there donate because they cannot get out because of the pandemic, and they have taught them how to use Zoom. And that's how I'm doing a lot of the workshops, from the seniors getting the laptops and then learning to use Zoom. So I think now, if this, I don't want to get into politics, but if this bill is passed, this $1 trillion bill, there's a component in that bill just for that. These seniors need computers. They cannot get out, so they need some type of communication where it is like a laptop where they're able to do a Zoom. That will keep them a little, you know, a little more subtle. They're too isolated, but with a Zoom, with computers, I think that will help them with communication piece and community engagement a lot. So I can find the information out, and I would be glad to share it with you of who, you know, what company is donating laptops and laptops to the seniors buildings.
Please do. That would be great.
Well, I'll be glad to share that with you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wright.
Sure.
I agree. That would be great. And you guys,
Yes.
I feel like anticipated Helen Love's question about attracting people and bringing them together to address issues of social isolation. And I think you guys brought up some great points, some very much related to infrastructure, related to the need for more senior affordable housing, more adult day centers, especially outreach for people who are not able to drive, who cannot drive, and then of course utilizing our existing resources, the church community, technology, et cetera. So thank you guys for that. Wonderful. We have had 2 other questions that come in after Ms. Love's, and Helen, if that didn't address your question, feel free to follow up. Rana Croft is asking, can you talk a little bit about engaging older Black adults from the lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and transgender community? So anybody who wants to take that can go ahead.
That is a really good question. There was an organization, I cannot think of the name of it. Oh my goodness, it's in New York. And they are the African-American version of SAGE. And SAGE is the organization that works with LGBTQ plus seniors. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so there are organizations. I know there's another one that's in Detroit, but there are organizations that are geared towards specifically working with African-American LGBTQ plus seniors. But in terms of engagement, I think that, once again, when Glenda was talking about trust and compassion, being willing to getting rid of those hangups. If my goal in life is to improve the quality of life of older African Americans, it does not say don't be inclusive of these people, because they're still, as long as you're older, hey, we can kick it. You know what I mean? And so I think that when with all of this research and engagement, having an open heart, and one thing that I do know. I took this training, and they were talking about the importance of the safe symbol, because that's something that is recognized. And when people see the safe symbol, and those of you who have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And it opens the door. It says, hey, I welcome you no matter how you come in. So I think having that on any sort of material that you have, you know, with whatever outreach that you do. I think also with engagement, whatever marketing materials you have, having two women standing next to each other. I, as a cisgendered heterosexual woman, can say, hey, they must be sisters. If I'm not, and I'm looking for some sort of inclusion, I could say, hey, well, they don't look alike, though genetics, you know, they're a crazy thing. So they could be lovers. Same with men. You have to be able to appeal to all groups. And I think that when people are looking to be safe, do I want to approach you if I'm othered in any sort of way? What kinds of things are being done to attract those people in a safe way? So those are the two things that I offer on a very, you know, small level, as that is not my area of expertise, but that is something that I need to write down, to research further and take further action on.
Mhm.
Thank you.
For sure. And I would just say that to piggyback on you, Aisha, is inclusion. You know, that wasn't, when we had our program, that wasn't necessarily a question that we asked. We served aging individuals and we welcomed everybody that was there. But I guess to your point, as an organization, there are things that we can do to make sure everyone feels comfortable. But that can also be suggestions from the community to other organizations on just how to make sure that they do know that it's inclusion of everyone.
And you know, fortunately, even in my sessions, when I have my workshops, even if anyone is in the workshop from the LBQ, you know, that the community, I've never had a situation with that. You know, everyone is welcome. There's no one, you know, everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome, period. Yeah, they would never have a problem with that. Not from our organization, no way.
Wow, I appreciate that. And I think that's such an important question because oftentimes, even within the group that we characterize as older Black adults or older diverse adults, there are intersections within that group that sometimes also get excluded. And so in the chat, people have been so wonderful suggesting either groups or websites and resources that are addressing LGBTQ issues. Grio Circle, there's an acronym.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, Grio Circle, wonderful. And then of course there's diverseelders.org, which is great. They have a Twitter account as well. And Leanne Clark Shirley is saying that wearing or signifying that you are inclusive, maybe through a lapel pin, is one way to sort of say that we welcome all older adults. You guys have been wonderful. This has been a very enriching conversation. I have enjoyed spending the last hour with you. We've gone through all the questions in the chat box, but if anyone else has questions, feel free to put them in there and we will circulate them to the panelists. I want to give you guys maybe a minute or so to just sort of like say anything that maybe you felt you want to say in the few, like 3 or 4 minutes that we have left. Is there anything that you want to leave us with that, like 30 seconds, that maybe you would like us to know about community engaged research?
Yes, just one thing. I don't know if it's relevant to our talk today, but please, we have to encourage our African Americans to take the COVID vaccine shot. I mean, that's just my opinion. We need to be vaccinated. We have to, we know about Henrietta Leaks. We know about the Tuskegee experiment. Science and medicine have far advanced since then. And we are really suffering in our communities, especially in our urban communities, with unvaccinated African Americans. And so that is that's what I have to leave with. But I appreciate all of you guys, especially the young lady, all of you, especially the one that have the adult daycare. Kudos to you. That is wonderful. And the other young lady on the gerontology. I appreciate you both, all of you guys.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
You're welcome.
Ms. Cooper?
I would just add that this is a boots on the ground effort. We can't sit back and think that it needs to be told by someone else. Do some of your own research and share it with your loved ones on the importance of just research and genetics and vaccination. We do have to, we'll never forget, but we are further along in the process.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
Yes, my final comments are to encourage the young people to get into gerontology. It is a very rewarding field. All of us on this panel, including the moderator, love it. It is so rewarding. And if you're looking for job security, this is the field to have it in. You will never be without a job as long as you are serving seniors. But it's so important to have people that want to serve African-American seniors, who want to be a part of conducting the research and being a part of it. And then if you're not interested in studying gerontology, that's fine too. Your civic engagement efforts, Senior Day at the Capitol, being a part of the Area Agency on Aging, volunteering at adult day centers like Aisha has. There's so many ways to be involved with seniors. Advocacy, calling your legislature when you know that funding is being cut, or we want to get bills passed for seniors to be safer, to deal with the infrastructure, as Glenda had mentioned, with housing and things of that sort. One quick thing, the digital divide, I think that's something that we've all brought up, but just providing some language around that. Getting rid of that divide is so important to the health and safety of seniors. And so any bills that you see coming up around that, please vote, please advocate. And thank you for having me as part of this panel. I'm blessed to be here. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Well, I thank all of you for this experience. I appreciate it. I'd like to extend our sincerest gratitude for you sharing your time and your knowledge with us. If there's anybody who wants to follow up with the panelists directly, feel free to reach out to me. I am putting my email address in the chat, and I'm happy to connect anybody who would like to be connected. So thank you all again for showing up, and we appreciate it. And watch your inboxes for the recorded webinar version. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.